All right. So the other kind of big thing news-wise, lots of injuries. That's always a big part of it. But specifically, guys that will start the season on IR and PUP. There are a few guys that were wondering, all right, are they going to be healthy week one? It looks like Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be good. Sam Laporta, Jalen Warren. Some of those guys we were worried about, the hamstrings. All right, they should be fine. But when we talk IR, PUP, there's like the NFI list. I don't know what all these lists mean. I just want to know, are my guys playing or not? But it seems like a bunch of these guys are being added to this. All three lists seem to be the exact same thing. They're out for 4 weeks. All right, fine. You're not going to play for 4 weeks. So what does that mean? What do we do with Nick Chubb, Jonathan Brooks, TJ Hockenson? I'll even throw Keaton Mitchell in there, Marshawn Lloyd. So these are guys that you have to decide, do I want to waste a bench spot and wait for these guys because you really believe in them? And then when you're drafting, how late or how early are you willing to take some of these guys too? Jonathan Brooks, you got to pay a decent price for. Like in the draft that I was just in, I was staring at him and I go, if I draft him right now, he's my RB2. Well, I can't do that. But then another guy drafted him as his RB3. Okay, fine. You can somewhat justify that. You're hoping that, hey, in week 5, he's going to come back and be a stud. So what has been your approach with this kind of specific group of guys? Do you have a specific strategy or principle, or now that you've got drafts coming up? So will you target any of these guys? And then I guess we also have to factor in, it just depends on if you have an IR spot. Most of the leagues I'm in you have 2 IR spots. And so if you can stash a guy, it really just means you extend your bench. And so if that's the case, there is I think you can make a case to target these guys in the right round, and it actually adds value because this is a 17-week season if we talk about playing in the fantasy championship.
Yeah, I don't hate this strategy of taking a guy that I know I can slot into my IR spot with my last pick of the draft. And for me, that guy might be Keaton Mitchell. I think you're hearing these things coming out of camp that they don't want to give Derrick Henry every carry and kind of run him into the ground. The Ravens are a team that they're playing for the playoffs. They're playing for the Super Bowl. And I think they've already said they're going to work Justice Hill in a fair amount. I think Keaton Mitchell, when he's healthy, is better than Justice Hill. And so I'd love to take him at the very end if I have an IR slot. If I don't have an IR slot, I'm not drafting him. Nick Chubb is such a great, like a player that you love to root for. And I don't ever want to count him out. With what happened to his knee, I just don't think he's ever going to return to the form that we think of when we think Nick Chubb, which means that Jerome Ford is being underdrafted. With this Nick Chubb news, I want Jerome Ford on my team. Similar dynamic with Jonathan Brooks and Chuba Hubbard. I've already stated on an earlier podcast, if the Panthers start off like 2-8, 3-7, I don't see any reason why they rush Jonathan Brooks back. And so I think Chuba Hubbard is the starting running back for the Panthers until their bye, which I think is week 10, week 9 or week 10. So again, that means that I'm not going to have Jonathan Brooks on my team because you have to take him so early. You pointed out that he could be the kind of guy who wins you your playoff games when the fantasy playoffs roll around. And so with some of these guys, I'm kind of putting their names in the back of my mind, and maybe I try to trade for them later in the season. But man, guys who start the season on the IR, that just makes me nervous. And especially with running backs, I don't see myself having Chubb or Brooks on my team. Keaton Mitchell's a name just to keep in the back of your mind. I think he's a guy to pay attention to later in the season. He's such an athlete, such a dynamic runner that if he comes back healthy, he could be a fun guy to have when your fantasy playoffs roll around. But
yeah, and he would be a great compliment to Derrick Henry. Like, because what Mitchell did last year in very limited amount of touches was amazing. Now he had a major knee injury, so he's got to come back healthy from that. So that's a big if for sure. But he is young. Chubb is a little bit older. The one guy that I'm wrestling with is TJ Hockenson. I'm a big Hockenson fan. Liked him in Detroit. Liked him. He's been great in Minnesota when healthy. I've avoided Minnesota. I don't have any Vikings players on any of my 3 teams. And so I'm okay with that. I feel very good about that. I brag about that. I'm strategic about that. But I have Hockenson in a keeper league that I have to make a decision. Do I want to keep him, stash him on the IR? And I may do that. But then it's a keeper. So I have to decide, all right, is that worth him being one of my keepers? So Yeah, but I've snagged Marshawn Lloyd as a backup running back in Green Bay because I am not a Josh Jacobs fan, and AJ Dillon has crushed me. He's crushed my heart too many times. So I can't do it again. I'm not going to put myself out there. So Marshawn Lloyd's he's going to start on the PUP list or whatever. So, but he's a guy late in the season I think could get some time, get some action.